Have you noticed that something inside you doesn't break the way it used to? Not louder, not dramatic, just quieter, heavier, more controlled. That pause you feel before reacting. That calm that shows up where chaos once lived. That's not accidental. You might not have words for it yet, but you feel it in your body. In the way certain things don't hit as hard anymore. In the way your patience has sharpened instead of softened. In the way you're tired of repeating the same emotional cycles. You've been carrying weight most people never see. Expectations, disappointments, self-doubt that learned how to speak your voice fluently. You kept moving anyway, not because you were fearless, but because stopping felt worse than continuing. And here's the truth no one says out loud. Real strength doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly after you've been pushed far past what you thought you could handle. It forms when you're forced to choose between breaking apart or rebuilding inward. You didn't suddenly become confident. You became tired of betraying yourself. You didn't suddenly become disciplined. You became exhausted by chaos. You didn't suddenly become strong. You became honest about what was draining you. There's a reason your tolerance for nonsense is lower now. Your nervous system is learning safety. Your mind is learning discernment. Your soul is learning boundaries. You've been misunderstood in this phase. People might think you're colder, more distant, less available. But what they don't see is how much energy it takes to stay regulated when you used to live in survival mode. You're not shutting down, you're stabilizing. And that quiet shift can feel lonely, because growth doesn't ask for permission. It pulls you away from familiar versions of yourself. It asks you to let go of patterns that once kept you feeling needed even if they were hurting you. There's grief in that. Grief for who you were when you were trying to be everything for everyone. Grief for the old coping mechanisms that once kept you safe. Grief for the relationships that only worked when you stayed small. But beneath that grief is something solid, something grounded, something unshakable. You're starting to trust your internal signals again. When something feels off, you don't argue with it as long. When something drains you, you don't romanticize it anymore. When something aligns, your body relaxes instead of bracing. That's not weakness. That's integration. Strength doesn't look like force. It looks like restraint. It looks like choosing silence over explanation. It looks like walking away without needing the other person to understand why. You're not chasing relief anymore. You're building stability, and that changes everything. If you stay present with this version of yourself, if you don't rush to escape the discomfort of growth, something powerful happens. Your identity starts to shift from who you needed to be to survive into who you actually are when you fit. Feel safe. This isn't a transformation you perform. It's one you inhabit. And the more you honor it, the clearer it becomes. You're not becoming harder. You're becoming rooted. And once that happens, nothing external gets to define your worth again. And once you're rooted, everything gets tested. Life doesn't slow down because you've grown. Pressure increases. Expectations rise. Old patterns come back to check if you're serious. This is where strength stops being an idea and becomes a decision. You start noticing how quickly your environment reacts to your change. Some people pull closer. Others push back, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your growth disrupts what they expected from you. And for the first time, you don't rush to fix that discomfort. You let them feel it. That takes courage, because the old version of you survived by adapting, by smoothing edges, by carrying emotional weight that wasn't yours. But now something has shifted. You can feel when you're about to abandon yourself, and you stop. This is where it gets real, because strength demands consistency. Not when it's easy, not when you feel inspired, but when you're tired, triggered, tempted to fall back into what's familiar. You're learning to sit with urges instead of obeying them, to feel emotion without letting it control your behavior. That's not suppression. That's mastery. Every time you choose restraint over reaction, your nervous system rewires. Every time you honor your boundary, your self-respect compounds. This isn't visible progress, but it's irreversible. There will be moments when you miss who you used to be. Not because they were healthier, but because they were predictable. Growth removes the script. It forces you to respond in real time. And that uncertainty can feel terrifying. But it's also where your power sharpens. You stop outsourcing your sense of worth. You stop waiting for permission to feel grounded. You stop needing everything to make sense before you move forward. Action becomes quieter, more deliberate, less emotional, and far more effective. You begin choosing long-term alignment over short-term relief. You turn down immediate comfort for future stability. That's not sacrifice. That's investment. This version of you understands something critical. No one is coming to regulate your emotions for you. No one is responsible for your direction but you. And instead of feeling abandoned by that truth, you feel liberated. Because now, your progress isn't fragile, it's internal. And internal growth doesn't collapse when circumstances change. You're not immune to pain. You're informed by it. You don't deny fear. You listen to it without letting it steer. You don't chase motivation. You rely on structure. That's how momentum becomes identity. And slowly, without ceremony, your standards recalibrate. You don't negotiate with disrespect. You don't rationalize inconsistency. You don't explain your boundaries to people who benefit from crossing them. You choose peace even when it costs you connection, because you've learned the difference between loneliness and self-betrayal. This path isn't glamorous. It won't always be recognized, but it will change the trajectory of your life, because strength isn't about how much you can endure anymore. It's about what you refuse to carry, what you walk away from, what you protect without apology. And here's the part that matters most. Once you cross this internal line, you don't go back. You might wobble, you might doubt, but you won't unsee what alignment feels like. You're building something inside yourself that doesn't panic when things fall apart, something that stays grounded when external validation disappears, something that can hold pressure without collapsing. That's not motivation, that's evolution. And the more you live from this place, the clearer it becomes. You're not becoming someone new. You're reclaiming who you were before survival taught you to shrink. And once you reclaim that self, life starts asking harder questions without asking permission. Moments arrive that demand choice, not intention. You feel the weight of responsibility settle in, not heavy but real, because knowing who you are means you can no longer pretend you don't know what to do. There's urgency now, a quiet pressure to live in alignment, even when it costs comfort, especially when it costs comfort, because turning back would mean unlearning the truth you've already felt in your bones. You begin to notice how much of your old life was built on delay, waiting to feel ready, waiting for clarity, waiting for approval that never came. That waiting kept you safe, but it also kept you stuck. Now, hesitation feels louder than failure. Inaction feels heavier than risk. And that shift changes how you move through the world. You act before confidence arrives, trusting that momentum will catch up. There's a moment when you realize no one is coming to rescue you from your own potential. No Nay is going to hand you the life you keep imagining. And instead of despair, you feel resolve, because that means it's yours to claim. You stop asking if you deserve more. You start asking what you're willing to do to honor what you already are. Discipline replaces motivation, commitment replaces mood, and progress stops depending on how you feel today. This is where resistance shows its teeth. Old habits pull harder. Old fears speak louder. They remind you of who you used to be when you were unsure, when you stayed small to stay safe. But now shrinking feels like suffocation. You feel it immediately. Your body rejects what your mind once tolerated. And that discomfort becomes your compass, steering you away from familiar pain toward unfamiliar growth. You stop romanticizing struggle and start respecting effort. You choose consistency over intensity. Small actions done daily begin to rewire how you see yourself. Every promise kept strengthens trust. Every excuse resisted builds integrity. You're no longer trying to become disciplined. You're becoming someone who keeps their word, even when no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching. That's when identity locks in. There's a fire that forms beneath the surface now, not explosive, enduring. It doesn't burn you out, it sustains you. This fire isn't fueled by anger or comparison. It's fueled by clarity, by the understanding that your time is finite and your potential is not. That awareness sharpens your focus. You cut distractions without nostalgia. You protect your energy like it matters, because now you know it does. You feel the pull towards something larger than comfort, a life built on intention instead of reaction, a standard that doesn't collapse under pressure. You stop negotiating with the version of you that wants to stay safe at the cost of staying stagnant. You choose growth even when it feels lonely, even when it feels slow, because deep down you recognize this truth, becoming the strongest verse. Ion of yourself isn't about dominance or perfection. It's about alignment. And once you taste that, there's no going back. And when alignment becomes your default, the world starts responding differently, not kinder, clearer. Consequences feel sharper now because you're no longer numb to them. You feel the weight of every choice, and that weight keeps you awake. It keeps you honest. Because pretending ignorance is no longer an option when awareness lives this close to the surface. You start waking up with a sense of responsibility that doesn't feel forced. It feels earned. You know what happens if you slack. You know what it costs if you drift, and that knowledge creates urgency. Not panic, precision. You move with intention because you've seen how easily momentum can slip away if you don't protect it. There's a moment when excuses stop sounding convincing, even to you. You hear them form, and you cut them off mid-thought, not with shame, with clarity. You recognize avoidance for what it is, a short-term escape that steals long-term peace. And you choose differently, again and again, until choosing differently becomes natural. You're no longer impressed by intensity without follow-through. You value consistency over promises. You trust actions more than words, including your own. This changes how you set goals. You stop aiming for outcomes and start building systems, daily habits, non-negotiable standards, structures that support you when motivation disappears. Because it always does. And now, you're ready for that. Pressure doesn't scare you the way it used to. You've learned that pressure reveals, not destroys. It shows you what's solid and what needs strengthening. Instead of running from it, you lean in. You let it refine you. You let it burn away what no longer fits. And each time you survive it, your confidence grows quieter but deeper. You notice how your inner world feels steadier, even when the outside is unpredictable. You don't spiral as quickly, you wreck. Over faster, you adapt. That adaptability becomes your edge. While others panic, you assess. While others freeze, you move, not recklessly, deliberately, because you've trained yourself to stay present under stress. There's pride in this phase, but it's clean. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't crave recognition. It comes from knowing you showed up when it mattered, when it was inconvenient, when no one was watching. That pride becomes fuel. It pushes you forward on days when progress feels invisible. You stop measuring yourself against other people's timelines. Comparison loses its grip because your path finally feels like yours. You're not rushing anymore. You're not stalling either. You're moving at a pace you can sustain. That balance keeps you in the game longer than most. And longevity changes everything. The strongest version of you isn't loud. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just keeps showing up, stacking small wins, protecting focus, and honoring commitments. That Sion knows discipline is freedom. That routine creates room for creativity. That sacrifice now prevents regret later. These truths settle in your bones. You feel a pull toward responsibility, not because you have to, but because you can, because you trust yourself to carry it. You're no longer afraid of your potential. You're more afraid of wasting it. That fear sharpens your priorities. It makes your decisions cleaner. It keeps you moving forward even when doubt whispers in the background. And here's the part that changes everything. You realize strength isn't something you reach and keep forever. It's something you practice daily, through choices that seem small but compound over time. You commit to that practice, not for recognition, not for validation, but because becoming this version of yourself feels right. And once you felt that, stopping is no longer an option. And as this practice deepens, something irreversible locks into place. You stop flirting with the idea of change. Start living inside it. There's no ceremony, no applause, just a quiet certainty that you cannot afford to drift anymore. Because you've seen what happens when you do. You've lived the cost of hesitation, and that memory keeps you sharp. Your days begin to carry weight, not stress, meaning every choice feels like a vote for the person you're becoming. And once you see life that way, nothing feels neutral anymore. You're either reinforcing alignment or eroding it. That awareness makes you deliberate. It forces honesty. You can't hide from yourself now. You notice how your attention has become selective. Not everything deserves access to you. Not every impulse gets followed. Not every invitation gets accepted. You start guarding your focus the way you once guarded your emotions. Because you understand something most people learn too late. What you give your attention to shapes your identity. And you're done letting it be hijacked. There's pressure in this phase, but it's self-chosen. It doesn't crush you. It sharpens you. You hold yourself to standards that would have scared the old you. And instead of collapsing under them, you rise. Because those standards were never punishment. They were proof that you believed you were capable of more. You stop waiting for external motivation. You generate your own momentum through action, small, unglamorous actions repeated until they carve discipline into muscle memory. This is where most people quit. Because it's quiet here, boring even. But you stay because you understand the truth. The strongest results are built where no one is watching. Your relationship with fear changes. It still shows up, but it doesn't dominate the room anymore. You let it speak without letting it decide. You move forward with it beside you, not in front of you. That shift alone separates you from most people, because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's refusal to be ruled by it. You begin trusting the process even when results lag behind F. Ort. You stop demanding immediate proof that you're on the right path. You know consistency always pays, even if it's delayed. That patience gives you an edge. While others bounce between impulses, you compound progress, day after day, quietly, relentlessly. There's a moment when you realize you don't crave the old chaos anymore. The drama, the emotional spikes, the constant need for reassurance. Stability starts feeling exciting. Clarity becomes addictive. Peace stops feeling boring and starts feeling powerful. That's when you know you've crossed a line internally. You're not trying to impress anyone now. You're trying to respect yourself. That changes how you speak, how you move, how you recover from setbacks. You don't spiral, you recalibrate, you don't quit, you adjust. That adaptability becomes your signature strength. You feel a sense of ownership over your life that can't be taken away. Not by rejection, not by failure, not by uncertainty, because your foundation is internal, and the internal foundations don't crack under external pressure. This is the version of you that keeps promises, that shows up tired, that chooses growth on days when comfort is louder. This is the version that understands time is passing either way and decides to use it intentionally. You're no longer asking for permission to become who you are. You're claiming it through action, through discipline, through restraint, through courage that doesn't need to be seen to be real. And once this clicks, truly clicks, everything else becomes secondary. Excuses lose power, distractions lose appeal, doubt loses its authority, because you've tasted what it feels like to live in alignment, and nothing short of that will ever feel enough again. And when alignment becomes non-negotiable, your inner world starts demanding integrity at a higher level. You feel it immediately when something is off, a conversation that drains instead of builds, a habit that weakens instead of sharpens, a decision that pulls you away from who you're becoming. You don't ignore that signal anymore. You respect it, because ignoring it would mean undoing everything you've built. Your tolerance for self-deception disappears. You stop lying to yourself about effort, about timing, about readiness. You see clearly where you're holding back, and that clarity creates pressure. Not the kind that paralyzes, the kind that demands movement. Because staying still now feels heavier than stepping forward. You begin to understand that discipline isn't about restriction, it's about direction. Every routine you keep is a declaration of intent. Every distraction you cut is a reclaiming of power. You're no longer drifting through your days hoping things improve. You're designing them with purpose, and that purpose starts shaping your identity from the inside out. There are days when doubt still shows up. It whispers that this effort won't matter, that no one will notice, that it would be easier to slow down. But you've learned something crucial. Ease has a cost, and you've paid it before. You remember the frustration of wasted time, the regret of untapped potential, and that memory keeps you moving when motivation fades. You stop romanticizing outcomes and start respecting process. You understand that mastery is built in repetition, in showing up when the results are invisible, in choosing discipline over mood. That's where real confidence is forged. Not in loud wins, but in quiet consistency, the kind that compounds until it becomes undeniable. Your sense of urgency sharpens because time feels different now. Not rushed, precious. You realize every day is shaping momentum, whether you acknowledge it or not. So you act with intention. You choose actions that align with your long-term vision. Even when short-term comfort calls louder, that restraint becomes strength. That focus becomes freedom. You notice how your presence changes. You speak less but with more weight. You listen more closely. You react less impulsively. People can feel it. Not because you demand attention, but because you carry certainty. And certainty is contagious. It commands respect without asking for it. You stop trying to prove your worth through exhaustion. You don't need to burn out to feel valuable. You pace yourself. You recover strategically. You understand that sustainability is power, that longevity beats intensity every time, and this mindset keeps you ahead while others fade. Your vision becomes clear because your mind is quieter. Less noise, less comparison, less unnecessary urgency. You're focused on what matters, building skill, protecting health, strengthening character. These priorities anchor you when distractions try to pull you off course. There's a calm confidence that settles in now, not arrogance, assurance. You trust yourself to handle what comes, not because you control everything, but because you've proven you can adapt. That trust makes you bold. It allows you to take calculated risks, to sink EP into challenges without needing guarantees. You begin living from a place of ownership. Your results are your responsibility. Your growth is your commitment. Your future is shaped by what you do today, not what you intend to do someday. That realization removes excuses. It replaces them with action. You're no longer waiting for the perfect moment. You create momentum where you are, with what you have, right now, and that choice repeated daily transforms your trajectory. This is what becoming the strongest version of yourself actually looks like. Not perfection, not constant victory, but relentless alignment. A refusal to betray your potential, a commitment to growth even when it's uncomfortable. You keep going because stopping would mean settling, and you've gone too far to settle now. And at this stage, the weight of your own potential becomes impossible to ignore. It sits with you in quiet moments, in pauses between tasks, in the space before sleep. You feel it pressing forward, not as pressure from the world, but as a demand from within. A reminder that you know too much now to play small. That awareness raises the stakes, because comfort starts to feel like betrayal. You notice how sharply your instincts have refined. You sense misalignment faster. You course correct sooner. You no longer need dramatic consequences to wake you up. A subtle tension is enough. A slight unease, that's growth. Your internal compass is calibrated, and it doesn't tolerate detours for long. This version of you understands that excuses don't disappear. They just lose authority. They still show up, dressed as logic, dressed as patience, dressed as self-care taken too far. But you see through them. You recognize when rest becomes avoidance and reflection becomes delay, and you choose move them. Int anyway. Not recklessly, responsibly. With intention, you begin to respect momentum like a living thing. You protect it. You don't sabotage it with unnecessary distractions. You don't test it with careless choices. Because you've learned how hard it is to build and how easy it is to lose. That respect makes your progress steadier, less dramatic, more durable. There's a shift in how you experience failure now. It no longer defines you. It instructs you. You extract the lesson and move forward without lingering in shame. You don't collapse. You recalibrate. That emotional efficiency saves you time and energy. It keeps you in motion while there's stalling self-judgment. Your standards become internal contracts, not rules imposed from outside, but agreements you've made with yourself. And breaking them feels uncomfortable in a way that external consequences never could. Because now, integrity matters more than image. Keeping your word to yourself matters more than looking good to others. That shift changes everything. You stop craving validation because you've built verification, proof through action. Evidence through consistency. You don't need to be told you're capable. You've watched yourself do hard things repeatedly. That quiet confidence doesn't shake easily. It doesn't depend on praise. It doesn't collapse under criticism. You become more patient with outcomes and more demanding with effort. You understand that results arrive on their own schedule, but discipline doesn't wait. So you show up even when progress feels slow, especially when it feels slow, because you know that's where separation happens. That's where most people quit. And your life starts to feel less chaotic and more intentional, not because problems disappear, but because your response is measured. You don't waste energy on what you can't control. You invest heavily in what you can, habits, mindset, daily actions. That focus compounds quietly, then suddenly, you feel a deeper connectio. Into purpose now, not a grand mission, a grounded one. To use what you have fully, to leave less potential unused. To look back knowing you didn't abandon yourself when it mattered. That purpose fuels you on days when inspiration is absent. There is a seriousness to you that wasn't there before. Not heavy, intentional. You don't joke your way out of responsibility anymore. You don't numb discomfort just to escape it. You face things directly, and that directness builds respect both from others and from yourself. You begin to realize this isn't a phase. It's a standard, a baseline you refuse to drop below. You don't need to be extreme. You need to be consistent. And that consistency reshapes your future in ways you can't fully see yet. You're not chasing a finish line. You're embodying a way of living. One where effort is intentional, choices are aligned, and growth is non-negotiable. This path demands more from you, but it also gives more back. Clarity, stability, self-respect. You keep moving because momentum feels right, because alignment feels right. Because becoming the strongest version of yourself is no longer a goal. It's who you are deciding to be again and again without compromise. And when that standard becomes your baseline, Life starts responding with heavier demands, not to punish you, to test you, because strength attracts responsibility, and responsibility reveals whether your growth is real or performative. You feel it when pressure increases and excuses lose their volume. You can't hide behind confusion anymore. You know what's required, and no one creates urgency. Your days stop feeling interchangeable. Each one matters now. Each choice carries consequence. You feel time moving, not rushing, but advancing with intent. That awareness sharpens you. It makes procrastination feel dangerous, because delay is no longer neutral. It's a decision to stay smaller than you're capable of. You become acutely aware of how easily momentum can be lost. One car, a less habit, one unguarded distraction, one compromise justified as harmless. You've lived that slide before. You remember how slow it was to climb back, and that memory keeps you disciplined when temptation whispers. There's a seriousness in how you approach your inner life now. You don't indulge every emotion. You observe it. You don't suppress it. You regulate it. That emotional control doesn't make you cold. It makes you effective. Because your energy goes,